How to stay calm and positive in life. Picture this. You wake up Monday morning, and before your feet even hit the floor, your mind is already racing. Work deadlines, relationship problems, financial stress, that conversation you need to have but keep avoiding. Your heart starts pounding, your chest feels tight, and you haven't even gotten out of bed yet. Sound familiar? Here's the thing most people don't realize. You're not broken, you're not weak. You're just human, living in a world that seems designed to steal your peace and drain your positivity. But what if I told you that buried deep within you is a switch, a secret key that can transform that storm in your mind into a calm, serene oasis? This isn't just another feel-good video with surface-level advice. Today, we're diving deep into 15 life-changing strategies that will rewire your brain, reshape your habits, and give you unshakable inner peace. These aren't just theories, they're battle-tested tools that have helped millions of people reclaim control of their mental and emotional state. By the end of this video, you'll have a complete toolkit for staying calm in chaos and radiating positivity even when life tries to knock you down. So grab a notebook, find a comfortable spot, and let's begin this transformation together. Chapter 1. The Paradox of Control. Here's something that might blow your mind. The harder you try to control everything in your life, the more out of control you actually feel. I know it sounds backwards, but stick with me on this. Most of us spend our entire lives trying to be the director of a movie where we're only meant to be the main character. We exhaust ourselves trying to control our jobs, our relationships, other people's opinions, the weather, traffic, the economy, even our own thoughts and emotions. But here's the brutal truth. The more energy you pour into controlling the uncontrollable, the more stressed, anxious, and overwhelmed you become. Think about the last time you were stuck in traffic. You probably felt your blood pressure rising, gripped the steering wheel tighter, maybe even honked your horn or changed lanes frantically. But did any of that actually make the traffic move faster? Of course not. You just made yourself miserable while sitting in the exact same traffic jam. Now imagine a different scenario. You're in that same traffic, but instead of fighting it, you take a deep breath and think, this is completely outside my control. I can use this time to listen to that podcast I've been meaning to catch up on, or practice some breathing exercises, or just enjoy a few minutes of quiet reflection. Same traffic, completely different experience. This is the paradox of control in action. True calmness doesn't come from controlling every detail of your life. It comes from understanding the difference between what you can influence and what you cannot. Let me share a simple but powerful exercise that will change how you approach every stressful situation. It's called the circle of influence. Imagine you're standing in the center of two circles. The inner circle represents everything you have direct control over: your thoughts, your actions, your reactions, your decisions, how you treat others, what you eat, how you spend your time. The outer circle represents everything outside your control: other people's choices, the past, the future, natural disasters, the economy, other people's opinions of you. Here's what most people do wrong. They spend 90% of their mental energy worrying about things in the outer circle while neglecting the inner circle where they actually have power. They stress about whether their boss likes them instead of focusing on doing excellent work. They worry about what might happen next year instead of making good choices today. They try to change their partner's personality instead of working on their own communication skills. But here's what happens when you flip this script. When you pour your energy into the inner circle, into what you can actually control, something magical occurs. Your influence naturally expands. When you focus on being the best version of yourself, you positively impact everyone around you. When you control your reactions to difficult situations, you often influence how those situations unfold. When you stop trying to force outcomes and start focusing on your effort and attitude, better outcomes tend to follow. I learned this lesson the hard way during one of the most stressful periods of my life. I was working at a job where my boss was unpredictable. The company was going through major changes, and I felt like everything was falling apart. I spent months trying to predict what would happen next, attempting to influence decisions that weren't mine to make, and losing sleep over scenarios that might never occur. Then one day, I had a revelation. I drew those two circles on a piece of paper and honestly categorized everything I was worried about. I realized I was spending almost all my mental energy in the outer circle while completely neglecting the inner circle. So I made a decision. I would focus exclusively on what I could control, doing my job excellently, maintaining a positive attitude, building good relationships with colleagues, and preparing myself for whatever might come next. The result? Within 3 months, I was promoted, not because I tried to control the outcome, but because I focused entirely on controlling my effort and attitude. The promotion wasn't even the best part. The best part was the peace I felt during those 3 months. Instead of living in constant anxiety about the future, I was present, focused, and genuinely calm. This principle applies to every area of life. In relationships, you can't control whether someone loves you back, but you can control how lovingly you treat them. In your career, you can't control whether you get promoted, but you can control the quality of work you produce. In your health, you can't control your genetics, but you can control your daily habits. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it's liberating. When you truly accept what's outside your control, you stop wasting energy fighting unwinnable battles. You stop lying awake at night replaying conversations you can't change or rehearsing scenarios that might never happen. You start sleeping better, thinking clearer, and feeling calmer. But here's the key. This isn't about becoming passive or giving up on your dreams. It's about channeling your energy where it can actually make a difference. It's about becoming strategically calm instead of randomly reactive. Chapter 2. The Gratitude Revolution. Now I want to talk about gratitude, but not in the way you might expect. Most people think gratitude means making a list of good things in your life and calling it a day. That's nice, but it's not going to create the deep, lasting positivity we're after. Real gratitude, the kind that transforms your entire outlook on life, is about finding gold in the shadows. Let me tell you about Sarah, a woman I know who lost her job during the recession. At first, she was devastated. She had worked at the same company for 12 years, and suddenly she was unemployed, with bills to pay and a family to support. For the first few weeks, she was angry, bitter, and terrified about the future. But then something shifted. Instead of just focusing on what she had lost, Sarah started asking a different question.
What can I be grateful for in this situation? It sounds crazy, right? Being grateful for losing your job? But here's what she discovered. Being unemployed gave her the first real break she'd had in over a decade. She realized she had been working in a job that was slowly draining her soul, staying because it felt safe and familiar. The forced break allowed her to reconnect with her family, rediscover interests she had abandoned, and honestly evaluate what she wanted from her career. 6 months later, Sarah launched her own consulting business doing work she was passionate about. 2 years after that, she was earning more than she ever had as an employee and working with clients she genuinely enjoyed. She told me, "Getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me, but I never would have seen it that way if I hadn't learned to look for the hidden gifts in difficult situations." This is what I call revolutionary gratitude, the practice of finding gold in the shadows. Here's a simple but powerful way to start practicing this. Every evening, instead of just listing 3 things you're grateful for, challenge yourself with these 3 questions. What's one difficulty I faced today, and what did it teach me? What's one thing that didn't go as planned, and how might it have protected me or redirected me towards something better? And what's one person who frustrated or challenged me today, and how did they help me practice patience, empathy, or strength? For example, instead of writing, "I'm grateful for my health," you might write, "I'm grateful for the headache I had this morning because it reminded me to drink more water and take better care of myself." Instead of, "I'm grateful for my family," you might write, "I'm grateful for the argument I had with my teenager because it showed me that they feel safe enough to express their real feelings with me, and it reminded me to listen more and lecture less." This shift in perspective is incredibly powerful because it trains your brain to look for opportunity and meaning in every situation. When you practice revolutionary gratitude consistently, you develop what I call Bennett-finding vision, the ability to spot the silver lining even in the darkest clouds. But here's where it gets really interesting. When you start looking for lessons and benefits in difficult situations, you actually start experiencing fewer situations as truly difficult. That traffic jam becomes an opportunity for quiet reflection. That criticism from your boss becomes valuable feedback for improvement. That rejection becomes redirection towards something better suited for you. I remember working with a client named Mark who was going through a difficult divorce. He was bitter, angry, and convinced that his life was ruined. During one of our sessions, I challenged him to find 3 things he could be grateful for about his.
Mark started to see that his divorce was forcing him to become more independent and self-reliant. He was learning to cook, manage finances, and take care of himself in ways he never had before. He was also reconnecting with friends he had neglected during his marriage and rediscovering interests and hobbies he had abandoned. Most importantly, he was learning valuable lessons about communication, compromise, and what he really wanted in a relationship. 6 months later, Mark told me, "I'm not glad my marriage ended, but I'm grateful for who I'm becoming because of it." This is the power of revolutionary gratitude. It doesn't change what happens to you, but it completely transforms how you experience what happens to you. It turns you from a victim of circumstances into a student of life, constantly learning and growing from every experience. But revolutionary gratitude goes even deeper than finding lessons in difficulties. It's also about appreciating the ordinary moments that we usually take for granted. It's being grateful for the fact that you woke up this morning, that your heart is beating without you having to think about it, that you have access to clean water, that you can see the sky, that you have the ability to learn and grow. When you start noticing and appreciating these basic gifts of existence, it creates a foundation of contentment that's not dependent on external circumstances. You realize that you're already incredibly wealthy in ways that have nothing to do with money, incredibly fortunate in ways that have nothing to do with status or achievement. Chapter 3: The Art of Emotional Resetting. Your emotions are like the weather. They change constantly. They're often unpredictable. And while you can't control them completely, you can definitely learn to navigate them skillfully. The problem is, most people treat their emotions like they're permanent states, rather than temporary experiences. Think about it this way. When you're angry, you think, "I am angry," as if anger is your identity. When you're sad, you think, "I am sad," as if sadness defines who you are. But what if I told you that you're not your emotions? You're the observer of your emotions. What if anger, sadness, fear, and frustration are just weather patterns passing through the sky of your consciousness? This shift in perspective, from being your emotions to observing your emotions, is the foundation of emotional resetting. It's the difference between being caught in a storm and watching a storm from a safe, warm house. Let me share with you the most powerful emotional reset technique I've ever learned. I call it the STOP method, and it can change your emotional state in less than 60 seconds. S stands for stop. The moment you notice you're getting overwhelmed by a negative emotion, literally say stop out loud or in your mind. This breaks the momentum of the emotional spiral and creates a moment of pause. T stands for take a breath. Not just any breath, but a specific type of breathing that activates your parasympathetic nervous system. Breathe in slowly through your nose for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, then exhale through your mouth for 6 counts. The longer exhale is key because it triggers your body's relaxation response. O stands for observe. Look at your emotion with curiosity rather than judgment. Instead of thinking, "I shouldn't feel this way," or "this is terrible," try thinking, "Isn't it interesting that I'm feeling angry right now? I wonder what triggered this. What is this emotion trying to tell me?" P stands for proceed with intention. Now that you've created some space between yourself and the emotion, you can choose your response rather than just react automatically. Ask yourself, what would be the most helpful response in this situation? How do I want to show up right here? I learned this technique during one of the most challenging periods of my life when I was dealing with a family crisis. My default response to stress was either to shut down completely or explode in frustration, neither of which was helpful. But when I started using the STOP method consistently, I discovered I could remain calm and clear-headed even in extremely difficult situations. The key is practice. Don't wait until you're in the middle of an emotional hurricane to try this technique. Practice it when you're feeling mildly irritated or slightly anxious. The more you use it in low-stakes situations, the more available it becomes when you really need it. But emotional resetting isn't just about managing negative emotions. It's also about amplifying positive ones. Most people are much better at dwelling on what went wrong than savoring what went right. They'll replay an embarrassing moment for hours, but forget a compliment within minutes. Here's a simple but powerful practice. Whenever you experience a moment of joy, gratitude, love, or contentment, pause and really let yourself feel it.
take a mental photograph of the moment. Notice what's happening in your body. Maybe your shoulders relax, your breathing deepens, or you feel a warmth in your chest. Spend at least 20 seconds really absorbing the good feeling. This practice is like making deposits in your emotional bank account. The more positive moments you consciously savor and store, the more emotional resources you have to draw on during difficult times. Another crucial aspect of emotional resetting is understanding that emotions have a natural lifespan. Research shows that the physiological component of an emotion, the actual chemical response in your body, typically lasts only about 90 seconds. If you're feeling angry, sad, or anxious for longer than that, it's because you're feeding the emotion with your thoughts. This is incredibly empowering information. It means that no matter how intense an emotion feels in the moment, if you can just observe it without feeding it with dramatic thoughts or stories, it will naturally begin to subside within a couple of minutes. I experienced this firsthand during a particularly stressful presscast presentation. Halfway through, I realized I had made a significant error in my data. My first instinct was to panic, and I could feel the anxiety rising in my chest. But instead of spiraling into thoughts like, "I'm going to get fired," or "everyone thinks I'm incompetent," I simply acknowledged the feeling. I notice I'm feeling anxious right now. That's understandable given the situation. I took a few deep breaths, corrected the error, and continued with the presentation. The anxiety passed within a few minutes, and I was able to finish strong. Later, several colleagues commented on how well I had handled the mistake and how professional I had remained under pressure. This is the power of emotional resetting. It doesn't eliminate difficult emotions, but it prevents them from hijacking your entire day or derailing your performance. It gives you the ability to feel your feelings without being controlled by them. Chapter 4. Rewriting Your Inner Story. The most important conversation you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself in your own mind. This inner dialogue, your inner voice, is running constantly, providing commentary on everything that happens to you, shaping how you see yourself and interpret the world around you. The problem is, for most people, that inner voice is like having a harsh, critical roommate living in their head. It's the voice that says, "You're not smart enough, you'll never succeed, everyone is judging you, you always mess things up." This voice is so familiar that most people don't even realize it's there, let alone that they have the power to change it. But here's something that might surprise you. That critical inner voice isn't actually you. It's a collection of old programming, things you heard from parents, teachers, peers, and society throughout your life. It's the voice of your fears, your insecurities, and your limiting beliefs. The real you, the conscious, aware, wise part of you, has the power to observe this voice and choose whether to listen to it or not. Let me share a story about David, a talented graphic designer who came to me because he was struggling with chronic anxiety and self-doubt. David had been freelancing for several years, but was constantly worried that his clients would discover he was a fraud and that he didn't really know what he was doing. As we talked, it became clear that David's inner voice was incredibly harsh. When a client asked for revisions, his inner voice said, "See, you're terrible at this. They hate your work." When he landed a new project, his inner voice said, "You just got lucky. They'll figure out you're not as good as they think." When he made a small mistake, his inner voice said, "You always screw things up. You're going to lose this client." I asked David to spend a week simply noticing and writing down his self-talk. He was shocked at what he discovered. His inner voice was far more critical and negative than he would ever be to another person. He realized he was essentially bullying himself all day. The first step in rewriting your inner story is becoming aware of the current story. Most people are so used to their inner critic that they don't even notice it anymore. It's like having a smoke alarm with a dying battery. The constant beeping becomes background noise until you consciously tune in and realize how annoying it is. For the next few days, I want you to pay attention to your self-talk, especially in challenging situations. When something goes wrong, what does your inner voice say? When you're facing a new challenge, what story does it tell you about your chances of success? When you look in the mirror, what commentary does it provide? Don't try to change anything yet. Just notice.
Awareness is the first step to transformation. Once you become aware of your current inner story, you can begin to challenge it. Most negative self-talk is based on distorted thinking patterns that wouldn't hold up under scrutiny. For example, if your inner voice says, "I always mess things up," ask yourself, is this really true? Can I think of times when I handled things well? Is always an accurate word to use here? Often you'll find that your inner critic is making sweeping generalizations based on limited evidence or isolated incidents. It's taking one mistake and turning it into a story about your entire character. It's taking one rejection and making it mean that you're fundamentally flawed. But here's the beautiful thing. Once you recognize these distorted thought patterns, you can start to rewrite them. Instead of, "I always mess things up," you might say, "I made a mistake, and that's how I learn and improve." Instead of, "I'm not smart enough," you might say, "I'm learning and growing every day." Instead of, "Everyone is judging me," you might say, "Most people are too busy with their own lives to judge me, and those who do judge me are revealing more about themselves than about me." David started practicing this reframing technique consistently. When his inner critic said, "Your work isn't good enough," he would respond with, "My work is continuously improving, and my clients choose to work with me because they value what I create." When the voice said, "You're going to lose this client," he would counter with, "I'm going to focus on doing my best work and communicating clearly with my client." The transformation was remarkable. Within a few months, David's anxiety decreased significantly, his confidence increased, and his business actually grew because he was no longer sabotaging himself with self-doubt. But rewriting your inner story goes beyond just challenging negative thoughts. It's also about consciously choosing to focus on empowering narratives about yourself and your life. Instead of seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances, you can choose to see yourself as someone who learns and grows from every experience. Instead of focusing on your weaknesses, you can choose to focus on your strengths and how you're developing them. One powerful technique is to write yourself a letter from your future self, the person you're becoming through all your growth and learning. What would that wise, confident, successful version of yourself say to you right now? What encouragement would they offer? What perspective would they share about your current challenges? This isn't about positive thinking or denial. It's about choosing stories that empower you rather than stories that diminish you. It's about becoming the author of your own narrative instead of letting old programming write your story for you. The inner voice that once criticized and doubted
can become your greatest ally and supporter. It can become the voice that encourages you to take healthy risks, reminds you of your strengths during difficult times, and helps you learn and grow from every experience. Chapter 5. The Power of Present Moment Living. Here's a question that might surprise you. Where do you spend most of your mental time?